Today we're conducting an analysis of a pivotal moment in the Spanish Civil War, the Republican counteroffensive at Brihuega. We'll be diving deep into the tactics and command decisions that really shifted the course of the Battle of Guadalajara, and this entire briefing is based on detailed operational records.
All right, our analysis will proceed through 5 key phases. We'll start with the crisis on the Italian front. Then we'll look at the resulting command decisions and reorganization. From there, we'll break down the Republican counteroffensive plan, focus on Brihuega as the center of gravity, and finally, assess the withdrawal and the establishment of the new front line. Okay, let's establish the situation. The date is March 12th. The Italian Volunteer Corps, the CTV, is facing a serious crisis. Their major offensive has stalled out, ground to a halt by fierce Republican resistance and, frankly, unsustainable losses.
Now, if you look at the operational map here, you can see just how intense the pressure was. The Republicans are throwing everything they have at the Italian lines. We're talking repeated tank-led assaults and, crucially, significant air support. And while the Italians are technically holding their ground, these attacks are bleeding them white. They're losing key officers, and it's making it impossible for them to concentrate their forces along the main highway.
And this is the critical point. Tactically, the Italians weren't giving up ground, but strategically, they were losing the battle. The constant attacks, the awful weather, and especially that Republican dominance in the air, it was just crushing their morale. The CTV command knew this was an unsustainable situation. So, with their troops at the breaking point, how did the Italian command react? Well, they were forced to make some major decisions, and they had to make them fast.
Recognizing his troops were completely spent, General Rada made a critical call on March 12th. He ordered his 2 frontline divisions to be pulled back for relief. Now, this wasn't just a simple rest stop. This was a clear admission that his men were in no shape to continue the fight without a serious break in reorganization.
But here's where we see a massive disconnect between the front line and high command. Just 3 days later, General Franco meets with his commanders, and he is reading the situation completely wrong. He believes the Republicans are weak and orders Rada to resume the offensive by the 19th. This put the Italian command in, well, an impossible position.
So while the Italians were faltering, the Republicans saw their opening. They shifted to the offensive and started drawing up a plan for a decisive counterattack.
Let's look at the evolution of this plan. The initial concept, on March 15th, was to encircle Brihuega with a wide pincer movement. But just 2 days later, they scrapped that idea. Lieutenant Colonel Rojo proposed a much bolder strategy. Forget the wide envelopment. Instead, they would punch a hole right through the Italian lines with a massive, concentrated assault.
And to execute this, they created a purpose-built strike force, the Agrupación de Maniobra, or Maneuver Group. Led by the Soviet armor expert General Pavlov, this unit combined elite infantry with a powerful tank force. Its sole mission was to achieve the breakthrough on the Italian front.
And the focal point for all of this was one place, Brihuega. The Republicans identified it as the Italian center of gravity, that critical point which, if taken, would cause the entire enemy position to collapse.
Now, Brihuega was a vital communications hub for the Italians, but it was a defensive nightmare. The town sits in a hollow, essentially a fishbowl, surrounded by high ground. This made it a perfect target for an overwhelming artillery and air assault.
This observation from Lieutenant Colonel Vicente Rojo, a key Republican planner, really hits the nail on the head. It perfectly illustrates the fundamental flaw in the Italian deployment. The position's tactical weakness far outweighed its strategic value as a communications hub.
Republican air power was really the hammer that broke the Italians. For 2 straight days, their aircraft, including the new Natachi bombers, relentlessly pounded CTVA positions and supply lines. The strikes didn't just cause physical damage, they shattered morale and paralyzed any attempt by the Italians to regroup.
Before the main assault on Brihuega even began, there was a critical preliminary action on March 14th at the Palacio de Ibarra. After 14 hours of intense fighting, Republican forces, spearheaded by the 12th International Brigade, captured this strongpoint. This was absolutely key as it secured a launch pad for the main offensive. Okay, so on March 18th, the final assault begins. At 1400 hours, a massive storm of artillery and air power hits the town. Pavlov's group attacks but runs into stiff resistance. So at 1800 hours, the Republicans unleash a second, even more brutal bombardment. That was the knockout blow. The Italian defenders completely broke, and by 1900 hours, Brihuega had fallen. So why did Brihuega collapse so quickly? It was a perfect storm of failures. It started with the fatal mistake of trying to hold an indefensible position. You add to that the overwhelming Republican firepower, surprise attacks from infiltrated units, and an Italian command that simply failed to see the disaster coming.
The fall of Brihuega triggered a much larger crisis, forcing a general withdrawal and the establishment of an entirely new front line.
And here's where a breakdown in communications causes a complete disaster. A panicked report from one general about the collapse of Brihuega is misinterpreted back at headquarters as a total collapse along the entire front. The result? A stunning order for a general withdrawal, even for units that were still holding firm.
And this map shows the result. The Italians are in full retreat on March 19th. The pursuing Republican forces, however, are cautious. They're exhausted too. This actually allowed the Italians to pull back without much pressure, as both sides had largely lost contact with one another.
This map here shows where the fighting finally stabilized. By March 26th, a new front line had formed. The battered Italian CTV was pulled out and replaced by Spanish nationalist troops. The Battle of Guadalajara was over, handing the Republic a significant, albeit temporary, victory.
That concludes our analysis of the counteroffensive at Brihuega. For those who wish to explore the original maps and operational documents for themselves, all the source material for this briefing comes from the excellent project at www.batallasguerracivil.es. Thank you for your attention.